welcome to NTD China News. I'm Karen Chang. Making headlines this Thursday, March 7th. Stricter sanctions against North Korea, but will China enforce them? The Chinese regime says no to tougher sanctions against Iran. And the death of Hugo Chavez gets mixed reactions in China. The United Nations Security Council has just unanimously passed a resolution for tougher sanctions against North Korea. It's the result of weeks of negotiations between the United States and China. As North Korea's closest ally, China will be the deciding factor in how strictly the stronger sanctions are enforced.
The UN Security Council has approved harsher sanctions against North Korea following its February 12th nuclear test. It comes almost immediately after a threat by North Korea to launch a preemptive nuclear strike against the United States and South Korea. The new UN resolution is the product of 3 weeks of negotiations between the US and China. China is largely seen as one of the few countries that have any sway over the rogue regime. The unanimous resolution makes existing sanctions stricter, specifically targeting the import of luxury goods like yachts and cars by senior North Korea officials. Although sanctions have been in place since 2006, the new resolution mainly closes a loophole that allowed individual countries to determine what counted as a luxury good. The gap gave North Korea access to things that the original sanctions were meant to block. Though whether the new resolution will have any effect depends mainly on how strictly China enforces it. Perhaps emblazoned by the apparent success of February's nuclear test, North Korea called an end to the armistice that stopped the Korean War in 1953 with promises of using lighter and smaller nukes to turn Washington and Seoul into a sea of flames. Although most analysts agree that a nuclear strike is unlikely, Seoul faces some risk of a North Korean provocation.
China's envoy to the United Nations said on Wednesday it would oppose increased sanctions and excessive pressure on Iran. Wang Ming, the deputy permanent representative to the UN, instead called for better diplomatic relations to deal with Iran's nuclear program. He said China is always against using force and opposes the unilateral sanctions some countries have imposed. The Chinese regime has remained an ally to the troubled nation despite its nuclear buildup. Last October, a report prepared for the US-China Economic and Security Review Commission said that China stopped supporting Iran's nuclear program under US pressure in 1997, but the report says the Chinese regime has continued to provide covert assistance. The 5 permanent UN Security Council members plus Germany met in Kyrgyzstan last week to discuss Iran's nuclear program. They will meet again in Istanbul, Turkey later this month. The US has a massive trade surplus with China, that is with green technology. Non-profit group the Pew Charitable Trust published a study this week showing the surprising result.
According to a report on 2011 figures, U.S.-based Pew Charitable Trust says the U.S. had a $1.6 billion trade surplus in green technologies with China. That's thanks to high-value technologies that required research and development.
Clearly, U.S. firms have an advantage, which is based on national leadership and innovation and entrepreneurship. I mean, these companies excel in the production and sale of complex and kind of high-margin, performance-critical goods.
China's economy has relied on large-scale manufacturing to fuel its growth. But to stay competitive, Chinese leaders are looking to produce more value-added goods. In a speech to the National People's Congress on Tuesday, outgoing Premier Wen Jiabao called for a surge in developing new and high-tech industries to raise product quality and competitiveness. The Pew study focused on things like solar panels and wind turbines, as well as other energy-saving technologies. In all cases, the U.S. registered a trade surplus with China because of its innovation and higher technical skills.
In a lot of press, if you follow simply the finished goods, so if you follow solar panels, China has an undeniable advantage right now. But if you look at the full ecosystem and the full value chain for these 3 clean energy sectors, the story is very different.
The study concluded that if the U.S. is to maintain its advantage, it must invest more and consistently in R&D. But whether the U.S. can maintain its R&D secrets is another question. A report by internet security company Mondiant found Chinese hackers targeting U.S. firms. And they weren't just any hackers. There's evidence they are part of the Chinese military. Analysts believe China is targeting U.S. trade secrets that could save it not only time, but large amounts of money in financing its own research and development.
Hugo Chavez died on Tuesday, and his death is creating mixed feelings around the globe. The official response from Chinese state-run media has largely been praise, calling him a, quote, good friend of China, but many don't share that view.
The death of Venezuelan socialist dictator Hugo Chavez is being mourned in China, at least officially. Chavez, known for his strident anti-American views, made 6 trips to China. Chinese state-run China Daily called him a good friend to the Chinese people. Chavez was known to be fond of Chinese food and enjoyed quoting Mao Zedong, the former Communist Party chairman responsible for disastrous policies like the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. But outside of the official state response to his passing, the memory of Chavez is less than glowing.
He cannot be a good friend of the Chinese people, but he was probably a good buddy of the dictators around the world. They help each other out, and at the most, he was a friend to dictators.
And as the Chinese regime's 2 sessions continues, democratic reform both in China and abroad weigh heavily on the minds of many in China.
Chavez, a leader of the socialist or communist Venezuela, his was a dictatorship regime. Perhaps with his passing, democracy around the world would advance, because now there is one less dictator.
Under Chavez, China became a major consumer of Venezuelan oil. He died on Tuesday at the age of 58 after a 2-year battle with cancer.
And still ahead on NTD China News, a Sichuan official adamant to continue cracking down on Tibetans. 60,000 people could lose their homes if another hydro dam project goes ahead. And this movie database website now unblocked in China. And welcome back. A senior official from Sichuan province tells a session of China's National People's Congress that his province will continue to repress the self-immolations which are going on in Tibetan regions controlled by China.
A Sichuan official said on Thursday authorities there will continue to crack down on Tibetan self-immolation protests. Addressing the National People's Congress in Beijing, Zhang Dongshun continued to blame the protests against the Chinese Communist Party on Tibet's exiled spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama.
Aba Prefecture has been cracking down on it in accordance with the law. You just ask why these things are still happening. It is, of course, because our struggle with the Dalai clique is long-term and fierce.
More than 100 Tibetans have self-immolated since 2009. Supporters say they are desperate responses to the Chinese regime's suppression of their culture and religion. Tibetan rights groups say at least 40 self-immolations happened in Sichuan province. Chinese authorities have reacted to the protests with intensified crackdown, handing out heavy sentences to those allegedly involved in helping others to self-immolate. In late January, a court in Aba Prefecture sentenced a Tibetan man to death with a 2-year reprieve. His nephew received a 10-year prison term. But since then, the self-immolation protests have continued. The Dalai Lama has denied the accusations leveled against him. He says he does not support the fiery protests and has called for dialogue with Chinese leaders.
According to Reporters Without Borders, China ranked as one of the worst countries for press freedom this year. But for every rule, there is an exception. In a little town in Hebei province, an independent newspaper is managing to survive.
A rebel newspaper is taking its claim in a little town in China's eastern Hebei province. The publication is called The Voice of the People. It's run by a staff of volunteers who also fund the paper. Once a prosperous town of 8,000, Gaoying has shrunk to a real estate town of about 200. The local party chief He Chunlu decided to sell the villagers' land to developers after he was elected in 2009. A series of forced demolition ensued. Many of the villagers lost their land, and the ones that stayed had their water and power cut. The ones that did relocate say they were not sufficiently compensated. Although there is no hard evidence, villagers believe that He Chunlu was lining his own pockets with the developers' money. They have photos of 3 of his cars, each costing tens of thousands of dollars. He Jianguo founded the paper in March of last year. He says his writing exposes the lies of the Gaoying Bao, the newspaper operated by the village government since 1993.
After the land was sold to developers, the villagers should get some of the profits. We like to expose these things.
Currently, the paper is working on local elections and getting He Chunlu out of office. They say he has overstayed his 3-year term and are calling for renewed elections. Elections were supposed to happen in April, but were pushed back till May. But then that election was declared invalid because of election fraud. There has been no election since. The paper has started endorsing candidates, and the paper's editor is in the running. He Jianguo is running on a platform of fairness and openness on village affairs. While the local party chief has not acknowledged the paper's presence, the propaganda office has. During the 18th Party Congress last November, the newspaper was forced to close down. It reopened under its current name and has been publishing after moving to a new printing house. He Jianguo says that besides being told not to publish on certain sensitive topics, it is under the propaganda department's radar.
60,000 people may lose their homes if Chinese authorities go ahead with plans to build 4 dams along the Nu River, China's last free-flowing river. Qin Guangrong, the party chief of southwest Yunnan province, gave the estimate today on the sidelines of the 12th National People's Congress. Authorities in the region have long planned to develop hydroelectric dams along the Nu River. In 2004, the proposal was temporarily shelved by outgoing Premier Wen Jiabao. The Nu River is a UNESCO-protected river, and environmentalists were concerned that dam project could severely damage the local ecological system. In February 2011, local authorities restarted the plans to boost China's energy production. Aside from the ecological damage, some in China have also raised concerns that the dam construction along the Nu River could trigger earthquakes. Geologists say the river is on an active fault line and would not be suitable for dams. China's mega hydro dams are a source of pride for the Chinese regime. The Three Gorges Dam, the world's largest, cost $59 billion and forced 1.3 million people to relocate. There's been a surge of people getting divorced in China. It's not because they're falling out of love, but it's for a more practical reason, sort of. Couples are untying the knot in the wake of new announcements about a big tax the government wants to impose on property sales. Here's more.
Through sickness and in health, except when there's a 20% tax to pay on your home. New measures announced last Friday by China to cool down the property market are driving married couples to divorce. In Shanghai, a marriage registration center divorced 53 couples in one day this week, according to Reuters. Other cities have also reported the same trend. The rush to untie their knots is an attempt to exploit a gap in the legislation. According to the new rules, property owners who sell their houses must pay a whopping 20% capital gains tax to the government. Authorities hope this would discourage property speculation. But there is a way out for couples with 2 properties. If they divorce, they can move one property into one person's name and the other to the other person. When they sell the house, it will be tax-free. Then they can remarry. One official from the Shanghai Civil Affairs Bureau warned wives to be wary, suggesting some men might use the tax as an excuse to divorce with no intention of remarrying.
China keeps a tight grip on websites Chinese netizens are allowed to see, and while sites like Facebook, Twitter and YouTube are banned, one popular site has unexpectedly been unblocked. IMDb is one of the most comprehensive movie databases online. Until yesterday, it was banned in China. It's been that way since 2010, when a Tibetan documentary appeared on the website's homepage. There's been no explanation why IMDb has been suddenly unblocked, but it does coincide with the 2 sessions, the 2 major meetings of high-ranking officials in Beijing. China has become one of the world's biggest movie markets in recent years, and although there are tight restrictions on what foreign films can be shown, that hasn't done anything to dampen China's insatiable movie appetite. A thriving bootleg market ensures easy access to all the latest movies, and now armed with IMDb, movie lovers throughout China are celebrating until the next time censors move in. And that's all for this NTD China news. For more on China-related topics, visit our website at ntd.tv or subscribe to our YouTube channel, NTD on China. Coming up next is China Focus with Shali Zhang. Stay tuned.